Africa's business landscape is as diverse as the various cultures operating on the continent. The best way to navigate it is to be armed with cultural intelligence. This according to Allison's inaugural Africa Business Cultural Intelligence Report. Claudine Moore, who's MD of Allison Africa, joins us to unpack the report and the insights it holds for navigating the continent's business landscape. Claudine, thank you for your time and a good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Before we delve into some of the insights from the report, maybe let's talk about the importance of it, why Allison Africa felt it important to really speak about the issues of culture within the African continent, and also maybe further pointing out that it's not one big homogeneous picture.
Yes, no, that's a great place to start. So, yes, Africa is not a country, as you and I both know, but to many parts of the world and many parts of the world, that notion of the continent of Africa still sort of exists as if the continent is a monolithic region, which, as you know, it is not. With the region sort of owning some of the fastest growing economies in the world, we just felt that it was important at this time when there's increased interest in investment and in trade, both internationally and across the continent, within the continent. We just felt now was a good time to really look into what the business cultural, very specifically the business cultural differences are and opportunities are within those countries. So we essentially took the continent and selected a country in every region, being north, south, east, west and central, and selected 5 countries, of which South Africa was one, to look into some different areas within each of those countries.
Let's touch on there, maybe starting off looking at the issue around business growth here and growth drivers. Very important one, because also what we're not seeing across the continent, or what we are seeing rather, is some regions really growing better than others. Southern Africa lagging behind slightly.
I'm sorry, what was the last point you said? Sorry.
I said Southern Africa lagging behind a little versus other parts of the continent. Yes.
That's an interesting point, because yes, lagging behind in certain areas, but also forging ahead in others. So one of the key data points that came out of the report for South Africa was that South Africa's cell phone market, for example, is the 4th fastest growing in the world at a rate of 50%. And that is a huge number and a huge percentage. And that presents a whole host of opportunities for businesses as well as individuals who essentially will be able to unlock a host of information and data and access with those phones. So yes, definitely lagging behind in some areas, but forever the optimist and always looking at the opportunities. That is just one data point that that really stood out to me as one of the major opportunities in South Africa.
Let's also touch on the media landscape. It's an interesting one because, of course, media is a huge informer of culture, isn't it, Claudine? Yeah. Let's talk about what some of the other regions are telling us and showing us about the media landscape.
So what's interesting about that is that, and this is essentially the case more with international investors who want to do business across the continent. We're a PR agency, so of course working with the media is what we do day to day. And we understand that, if, for example, in South Africa, it's a multilingual country. There are many languages, not just English, not just Afrikaans, many languages. And essentially any organization has to make sure that when they are, depending on their business, that they are communicating with the audiences in multiple languages. I think often when you have an organization that isn't familiar with the continent, they don't understand the importance of language and the importance of language, as you mentioned at the beginning, to culture and essentially then to business culture. And it's really essential to understand who you're talking to, why you're talking to them. Media, as you know, really it provides information, it shapes opinion, it also creates a call to action. So you really want to make sure that you are leveraging media in the right way to talk to your stakeholders and your audiences.
Another interesting one, I think, is informing culture on the African continent is US-Africa diaspora relations. Let's also talk about that one. Yes. It's an important one to bring it to the fore here because, of course, we've got so many Africans living all over the world, learning new skills and gaining different perspectives.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned, you're asking all the right questions. I'm glad you asked that, because one of the surprising things for me in this report, and I have a data point for you here, is the World Bank estimated that last year remittances flows into sub-Saharan Africa reached just over 54 billion in remittances. And that is one of the powerful things about the diaspora, and focusing specifically on the US diaspora. But it brings a massive influx of remittances, investment, also market access. So there really is a lot of power in all African countries and nations, really leveraging the diaspora to the fullest. President Biden just last year launched the inaugural US African Diaspora Committee, and which is the first time an American government has launched such an initiative. And that just speaks to the importance of the diaspora when it comes to the African continent and South Africa in particular.
An exciting one for me, female entrepreneurship. Let's talk about that one. But also, Claudine, why it was important for you to include this one specifically?
So another interesting data point is that in this research, we discovered that a staggering 58% of entrepreneurs across sub-Saharan Africa are actually women. And that means that women are more likely to be entrepreneurs than men when we're talking about the continent. And also in specific countries, that sort of ebbs and flows in terms of percentage. So I think what previously was a good social imperative to sort of engage women, it's actually now a sound and solid economic strategy, considering the sheer numbers of women entrepreneurs, albeit informally in many cases, but the sheer number of women entrepreneurs, it now makes it a really sound economic strategy to focus on women entrepreneurs, providing more access to finance. That's a major obstacle. Banks are often hesitant to lend money to women, especially if they lack collateral or a strong financial track record. More education, more training. There's a limited amount of networks and mentorship programs. At Allison, we have our own mentorship program called the Future is Female Mentorship Program, which is dedicated to African female tech founders. And every year we've done it. This year's the 5th year. We always get a strong contingent of female founders from South Africa. We launched that in 2020. Didn't realize it was going to take off the way it has done. But now, 5 years later, this year's the 5th year we're doing it. We have sponsors and partners such as Google and Salesforce who joined us last year as partners on for that program. And that just speaks to the importance and also the appetite for supporting not just female founders, but specifically African female founders as well, who are the most unsupported of founders globally, are the African female founders.
Well, Claudine, very fascinating insights coming from this report. Thank you for sharing it with us today. And that was MD of Allison Africa, Claudine Moore.